This is the Revved Up Sports Show with Bobby Chaffee.
We do have this nice little format that we try to follow every week. We don't usually follow it.
And Rodney Rodriguez.
Entertain me. Tell me something. I need to know something other than what I'm seeing.
Y'all ready? Here we go. Here's Bobby and Rodney.
Hello, everybody. It is Wednesday, and we are doing this. Hashtag Real Race Talk from Texas. This is the Revved Up Sports Show. Lots to do tonight. We've got to talk about the Snowball Derby, the Snowflake, all of that. Promoter of the Year coming up at 7:30 as we're going to talk to Phil Whipple. And, I mean, Bobby, there is no time to even mess around and go anywhere else other than Pensacola, Florida. What we just saw. Biggest race of the year, and you saw it right there. All right there in one spot. Nope, I think I may have lost him. All right, well, I'll lead. So you have the biggest race, the Snowball Derby, and it once again did not disappoint as you sit and you watch these guys. I mean, it's the Super Bowl of short track racing, and I think this year is just another reason why. If there were any question, if there seriously were any question about that statement when you say the Super Bowl of short track racing, it was all answered just with everything that we just witnessed. And whether you were actually there or whether you caught it on Speed 51 or however you consumed just everything that happened there. And not just the snowball itself. It was so many different variables of that entire weekend. And you had there were going to be questions of weather, and we thought that weather was going to be a factor. It looked like some of the support races, if you want to call it that, it looked like some of that was going to be in jeopardy when Thursday was not looking good. But when it all worked out, I mean, everything was totally fine. Everything was totally fine to where it wound up being a great weekend of racing. And once again, Tim Bryant and the great folks there at the Snowball Derby at Five Flag Speedway, they pull that off in a manner where and we're sitting here, we're going to talk to Phil Whipple, and we're going to get all of this Promoter of the Year and Texas short track racing figured out. And if you really want to appreciate, I mean, the job of the promoters is just so hard. I mean, I did a podcast on that and just talking about everything that goes into that. But to watch how everything just runs, the continuity there with everything that happens there, because you're talking about, I mean, you had 55 super late models, you had over 40 pro late models, you had just so much that was going on, and that's not even talking about when we get into the Outlaws and all of the other stuff that was happening there as well. So to watch all of that come to pass and happen the way that it did, I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable to sit there and watch that happen. And Tim and those folks, they are really the ones that need to be applauded for everything that happens there, because you can bring the racers in, you can do everything that you have to do to make the event happen. But if you don't have just a phenomenal team there, it's not going to work out. It is absolutely not going to work out. And it certainly did work out there at Five Flags. And Bobby, I think that what you really look at that is for them to be able to pull all of that off. I mean, so much. 'Cause you don't know what you're going to be faced with. And especially through all the pandemic and everything, you can figure out every reason to why this is going to be a challenge. But once again, I think with the 53rd Annual Snowball Derby, I mean, this is one of the biggest home runs they've hit all time.
Well, I think so. I think with the way that everything was shaken out as the whole week progressed, everything from Thursday, Friday, Saturday into the big race on Sunday, it ended up being a really good weekend. And a lot of people weren't thinking about the pandemic, not just because there was a big crowd, but just due to the racing action. It was a way to kind of get away from the craziness of 2020. And I think that as we've talked about many times on this show, when you have an aspect of people thinking about not being able to get to race at all in 2020, and here we are having the weekend at one of the biggest short track events in the country, that you didn't take it for granted this year. And I think everybody tried to really embrace it and enjoy the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really think they did. I mean, I think that everybody did, because they brought it, and the energy in that place It was tremendous from the drop of the green flag of the first race all the way through, and you really did. It was a gathering where you get the best in the business, and when we say the best in the business, I mean you add Chase Elliott, you add Kyle Busch, you add all of the other factors that were a part of this, and you watch them go at it, and from the drop of the green, the intensity was just at a level that man, it's hard to equal that. I mean, I really sat there as the races were going on, and I got there late. I mean, you all were there, plenty early, but I mean, I didn't roll in there until Saturday or Sunday, and that seriously was NASCAR Cup style intensity that we were watching there.
It really was. There's always a special feeling about it when you get to the race on Saturday or on Sunday, rather, just with the way the introductions are going, and you get the driver interviews, everything with Bob Dillner, and you just kind of feel that specialty that is about that race, that it's a really unique and a very interesting atmosphere. The races, it seemed like there was a lot of hype there for the Snowflake there on Saturday, a little bit more hype for it than there has been in a little while. But that race turned out to be, I guess the finish made that race even better than what it was supposed to be. But all in all, I think that was the whole weekend was good. There was some good racing in the modifieds. That race got to be a little bit longer than what people wanted to, as you sat in the grandstands, and it took kind of forever to go. A race takes a long time to go when they run 150 something total laps, and they have to come in and put gas in the cars before the checkered flag flies.
Yeah, we'll break down that finish, because that is obviously going to be the driving topic. We, as many other shows around the country, would want to know. But we'll get to that here in just a second. But before we really get into everything, just a couple of people that we, as the Revved Up Sports Show, have to thank a few folks. First of all, Jake Wright Motorsports. Those great folks. Bruce and Miss Ellie and Jake and the team there for just great accommodations. They kept us fed. They kept us hydrated, a lot of times in the wrong ways. But, those great folks, thank you to them for allowing us to be a part of their camp and just palatial confines right there. Then we also got to thank our man Joe Armandia. Joe Armandia, we ran into Joe over at Edna, and Joe Armandia had one of his drivers that came in that had been driving Joe's car and handed him the winnings there from Edna, and Joe handed that right over to me. He said, "You guys take this with you to Snowball and do with it whatever you need." So great folks right there. That's this racing community. That's what they're all about right there.
Yeah, no doubt. I echo the same thanks that you did, as well as to Jake Wright Motorsports and the crew for all their wonderful hospitality. Miss Ellie keeping everybody on pace and on track, and then of course thanks to Joe for the little bit of extra money. He'd probably be mad if he found out we were telling everybody that's what he did.
I know.
But,
I know. Yeah,
But we got to thank the man somehow.
He distinctly said not to say anything about it, and it's Joe's a dude where he will be, and we will have him in line here for the Legend Series at some point where we'll get him on here, because that's a guy that can tell all kinds of stuff. And we heard some really good stories there from Joe as we were talking to Joe and Carolyn and the group there. So a big thanks to all those folks, and again, Bruce and Miss Ellie and everybody, just so good to us. And still, I have that, and it's not just from being there at the fairgrounds, it's from the whole weekend. I still have that campfire smell in my nasal passages. Like I was telling you, Bobby, today, I went to cycle this morning. I had on my beanie there that I was wearing at one of the campsites there, and I had that on for about 30 minutes, and I get to cycle, I take that thing off, I start sweating. I'm like, man, where's the campfire? I feel like I'm should be back out by the fire again.
Yeah, no, I had the same thing with a couple of the jackets that I had kind of sitting there together. With it being cold, had to bundle up. It was not as cold as in some past derbies, but it was still pretty cold there on Friday and Saturday night there for the races. But the after party is always good down there in the hood, and I still I have to get an extra wash in on a couple of different clothes to kind of keep stuff from smelling just like a campfire. But it's a good problem to have, because it was a great time had by all.
Yeah, it was, and just some great folks there that took good care of us, and we got to hang out, and that's the beauty of that race. I was talking about that the other day, where you go out and you're in a different spot. It's just kind of like an offshoot of Texas, because you go out and you get to have those conversations. You see people that you haven't seen in a while, and you go out and you meet new friends, and you get to talk to different people from all around the country. And what I'm super excited about was the one thing that I really took back from this, and this was just in my 2 days there in Pensacola, was how we as Texans, for having been out of the game for so long, we got a lot of people with some attaboys and really impressed with what's been going on here in Texas. We've been out of the game for a little bit, but apparently we're doing something right because we're on the map again there on the Gulf Coast.
We really are back on the map again. We had a couple of different racers, Casey Smith, Chris Davidson. They're normally heavy hitters down there, and Casey ran well and represented excellent in the modified race there on Friday night. But you just had the aura when people found out, oh yeah, you Texas guys, you're back. Yeah. And that was kind of the way that, back for a long time, we were there. It was, you had back in the day, had the Umschides and Greg Davidson and some of those guys coming and representing. And then you had that next generation there with Bubba Nauman and Casey Smith and that group there representing Texas. So I think it's nice to be back on the map in terms of having people know when you tell people you're from Texas, they give you that nod like, oh yeah, you guys are starting to fire back up over there.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of the Texans, let's talk about their performances down there this past weekend at Pensacola in the trucks. So you jump out in the trucks and just a great run as Jake Wright, our state champion, our NASCAR champion. We talked about Jake Wright Motorsports, gets out there, nails down a 4th place finish. I think for those of us that were at home, we're super confused there. There was a transponder thing or something that wasn't quite right there. But I firmly believe that with the strides that team made, if they went back tomorrow, they wouldn't qualify where they qualified the last time. I mean, they figured the place out and essentially ran out of laps. But Grant Thompson and John Heil, that was going to be a tough build to beat right there. Grant Thompson just put on a really good show right there. We saw Grant in Houston. We've had him on this program, and Grant does a great job in that race. But let me tell you something. Jake Wright on the wheel and a really good 4th place in his debut there at Pensacola.
Yeah, to go where he went from where he qualified to drop back to I think it was 11th or 12th. There and was able to make his way back up through the field without the aid of a caution. I mean, there was a couple of cautions, but without, helping him get from the top 5, he did a lot of those late race passes under green. And so I think once he got used to the racetrack, it's an intimidating place when you run down there in turn number 1 for the first time. That's for sure.
It's a lot different. It's a lot different than the 3/8 over at Houston. So a really good run there. Anthony Monroe, I mean, he finishes a race. He ends up with a top 10. He winds up 9th, so a good run there for Monroe. He's familiar with the track. He gets out there, and he got a lot of coverage on Speed 51. I can tell you that. I was watching from home, and he was on there a lot. But that's that Monroe driving style, man. That's when you drive like Anthony, when you kind of let that ass end sling around a little bit, you're going to get on TV.
Yeah, he was on TV a lot and had a lot of coverage there from Robbie and Bill. They're live on the microphone there with the racetrack PA feed, but they had lots of good stuff to say about Anthony in terms of how wild and crazy he was. But they, all in all, I think to finish top 10 in the trucks at the Snowball Derby, that's a good feat to have.
Questions popping up there on the Facebook feed. You all feel free to jump in as well. Jake Wright did a great job. Our man Shane Turner. Thanks again, Shane, for your hospitality as well. You and Calvin and everybody there. Does he still have the fireball? From what I heard, I think that fireball is probably a thing of the past.
The bottle might still exist.
I know where it might be. I know where the remnants of it may be, but we'll leave that for a non-show story. No need to really dive into that. In the Outlaws, our man John Heil, he comes home 4th. Heil started out really hot there. I mean, Heil takes off, and I'm thinking, all right, Heil's about to get on the wheel here and do it to it, but it kind of faded a little bit. Had to bring himself back to 4th. Robert Barker, 12th. In the race, he got tied up in some stuff, and we heard that he had some tech stuff there. It's really tough when you get there and you have to start modifying your car. When you've had your car one way for all season, you get there and you have to start doing things. That presents a challenge, especially at a race with that magnitude.
Well, it really does. When you have some of the best outlaw racers in the country, a lot of them are based right there in the Gulf Coast area. They're in Pensacola, and a lot of really good Wheelman Series racers that run in. Down at the Sunshine Speedway and stuff like that, but there was top of the notch outlaw racers there running that race, and Robert did have the tech issues there before, trying to get his car kind of in line, so to speak. Yeah,
narrowed
up a little bit. But then when you narrow stuff, like you said, you got issues with tires rubbing places they ain't rubbed before.
Yep.
And so that didn't help his right rear out any. But definitely it was a good race. Heil was surprising as far back as he dropped, but then there with a couple of late race restarts was able to get his way back to 4th. Thought he was going to get up as high as 2nd again, but it just didn't look like he had the car to do it. up there on the outside.
Yeah. Then you go to the modifieds, and that was a really good performance from the Texas guys. As Casey Smith, runner up, he set the fast time, and that man Casey was just really really good. But he's not able to win the race, but he is the runner up. You have to know that the Smith Excavating team is really happy with that, and I would think that Casey getting back into the snowball fold there once again, where he's back a part of that weekend again. It may have him, aspiring maybe for some super stuff, or I don't know. The modifieds are great and everything, and he was all over it. So good job by him and our man, the Pasadena Terror. He comes in sixth place. Johnny Walker with another good run there. Good to see old JW. Good to see the old Pasadena Peach there jump in and have himself a good top 10 run.
Yeah, both those guys did a great job. Casey led a little bit of that race. I guess a lot of that race really there towards the end. Had there not been that last caution, I think Casey could have come through and been the winner of that race. But that's just the way that the cautions fly. Sometimes the racing gods have other plans for you when it comes to winning big races like that. But I think all in all, I think Casey had a good time. It was a change for him racing that modified there versus racing the super late model. But there's enough similarities between the modifieds and the super late models where that a lot of guys running the open motors and stuff kind of have that same feel, but you got a little bit smaller tires, so you got to kind of adjust to that and get different things going. So all in all, I think Casey did as good a job as he could, being the first time back there in a modified, first time back to Five Flag Speedway in a long time.
Yeah, very narrow footprint there with that 8-inch Hoosier, quite a bit different. Hey, remember to follow us on Twitter at RevvedUpATX as well. Check out the Revved Up Sports Show YouTube page. We're streaming live on that baby right now. And if you're a Twitch person, go to Twitch and look up RevvedUpATX. You can find us live there as well. YouTube, you got all the archives. Of course, you have them right here on Facebook as well. RevvedUpSportsShow.com. You've got this live video happening right now. And you've got all the archive feeds on the RevvedUpSportsShow.com. You only get live video. You'd have to come back to Facebook or YouTube if you want replays of the video. So you go to the Snowflake, and Chris Davidson, just the Alan Turner Snowball or the Alan Turner Pro Late Model champion there at Five Flags for 2020. He comes home 7th, and just another. I think that is 4 straight top 10s. I think is what I saw for Chris Davidson. Just so good right there. Flying Ryan Luja, that's a guy that had a lot of folks excited with his weekend there. He pounds the fence there in final practice. Comes out, he's still fast. Had a good run going once again. He falls back to 17th, but I think Flying Ryan Luja back on the map once again. And for Chris Davidson, that's a really good representation there for Texas with those two guys.
Yeah, Chris obviously is well known in the Pensacola area for running all of his stuff with the super late model and then the pro late model as well. The championship helps out a lot, but him and Greg have been racing down there forever. But in terms of some of the other stuff down there, that Luja was just fast the whole time. He was just sitting there. He was lights out in every single practice session, right at the top of the board, and then lost a tire and ended up hitting the fence there late there on Friday afternoon. And so their team worked overnight and worked nonstop to try to get the car back together. Had a decent qualifying run. I want to say he qualified in the top 5, up in 4th position. But all in all, he had a pretty stout race for the most part. Ran in the top 5 for a good majority of that race, and ended up having some technical issues and faded late.
Yeah, really good run by him. Just the weekend overall. Obviously the 17th finish, not what he was looking for, but I think he's really solidifying himself. He's running there with Jet Motorsports. That's a great team, but I think he's really stamping himself. He wins prior at the Governor's Cup. I think he's really making a strong case that he needs to be back in these pros or maybe super late model, whatever it may be, to be back in these full time. You go to the Snowflake. We'll talk about the full Snowflake results here in just a little bit. We'll talk about the finish. I know we'll talk about the finish because everybody wants to talk about the finish, but we're talking about the Texans now. You go to the Snowflake or the Snowball Derby, and Caden Honeycutt. That dude right there. And I was actually trying to get Caden on this program tonight, but he had school stuff. He had to get reacclimated and get school stuff back in order. Otherwise, he'd have been on tonight. But you want to talk about somebody that opened some eyes. Bobby, we're driving back from Pensacola, and we have it on SiriusXM Radio, and Matt Weaver's on there, and he talks about a guy that was on the mark, and you're thinking, okay, who's this going to be? Caden Honeycutt, and that's much deserved because he was kicking ass all weekend.
He really was. He was near the top of every single practice session and ran well. Apparently, he qualified 2nd on the outside road, but he said his all our reports, insider Shane Turner said that his radio was unplugged, and so he didn't get a chance to have the team tell him to go even a little harder than what he did. So But I don't know. That was a blistering lap set there by Derek Thorne. So I think that there was not a lot left on the table, but great, just a great weekend all the way around. Longest race that he's ever run before. He's used to running those 100 and 125 lappers, especially the last couple of times for Donnie Wilson and them. So, as far as like you said, as soon as we get on there, Dave Moody asked Matt Weaver, say, hey, who's the next young up-and-coming star? And as soon as he said Caden Honeycutt, both of our mouths dropped wide open, and it was like, wow. So Caden, a friend of the show, looks like good things coming. When you have the right opportunity, you got to make the best of it. And so far, every time he straps behind the wheel of that Donnie Wilson Racing number 2 car, he's definitely taking advantage of it full time.
Yeah, and how about Donnie Wilson Racing? I mean, you want to talk about some impressive stuff right there. I mean, you got Chandler Smith, and that dude overcame a lot himself, and that's where it goes back to with Five Flag Speedway, Ricky Brooks, Tim Bryant, everything that they do there. They have rules written, and they stick to them. And this is Promoter of the Year show. And, I mean, that's one of the things. You have to be consistent, and they're consistent. Whether you look at it as a podunk rule, or you want to call somebody an asshole or a dick or whatever you want to call them, I mean, they stick to the rules. I mean, they stick to the rules. But so let's go to the Snowflake. And that's really Jake Johnson wins that race. And we'll talk about the finish here in just a minute. But Jake Johnson, to even be in a spot to be the next car in line, the third place car. What a run for that young dude right there.
Yeah, obviously he didn't have the qualifying run he wanted and had to end up running the last chance race. Ends up winning the last chance race, starts 30th in that race, and is running all the way up to third. At one point he was fourth, and you're like, all of a sudden, where did he come from?
Yeah.
And he ended up racing all the way through the field and just out of nowhere was running in the top 5. And then, as we said, racing is the way that it is sometimes. It just happened to be in the right place at the right time and cross the finish line. Well, I guess technically he crossed the finish line second, ended up being third, or ended up being the winner.
Right. So let's talk about that. You have them. They're coming down to the line, and I mean, something's going to happen because you know the history there with Bubba Pollard and Stephen Nasse. Those are two of the best. Maybe the 2 best, in this pro late model racing, super late model racing. I mean, they are the best. Something's going to happen, and it does. And I think the crazy part of it was with the call that was made, because that never happens. I mean, we go to short tracks all over the state, and you watch short track racing all across the country, Bobby, and that shit happens every weekend. And for Five Flags to actually drop the hammer and put him, and they messed up because they said disqualified. He wasn't disqualified. They put him back to the end of the lap, or the lead lap cars. But that was a crazy move. Haven't seen anything like that in a long time.
It was a very interesting scenario, to say the least, as far as how they did that. It is a lot of people felt it was a racing deal. It was kind of one of those weird parts to where the grandstands was split 50-50. Everywhere we were, everybody was talking about it. You were either on Bubba's side or you were on Stephen Nasse's side, one way or the other. All the people that said Bubba would never do that, I'm not saying Bubba would, but I think if the situation was reversed, probably see the exact same thing happen, more than likely with that deal. But the internet was definitely 100% behind Stephen Nasse for sure. If you got on Twitter right after that race was over, and it was almost unanimous, that was a racing deal, shouldn't have been penalized and stuff like that.
Yeah, because if you really go back and watch that, I mean, it really was the bump and run that we're so accustomed to with pavement racing. I mean, you see it in dirt too. I mean, they call it a slide job in dirt where they happen to make contact, but this really was a bump and run. And where the question comes in with Bubba Pollard, and Bobby, you and I were talking about this, and I mean, I said it, and you said it too. I mean, Bubba got bumped out of the way where Bubba spun, and I mean, I've been in Bubba's position like that. I mean, not at the magnitude like that. Bubba spun because he was trying to hook Nasse. If we called him on this phone right now, I guarantee he would tell us he's trying to hook him. That's why he spun out. That's why Bubba said that it was a racing deal. I mean, it was totally a racing deal.
I think it was in terms of that. Besides, because you could look at it and see it was a bump and run, not a bump and dump. There's 2 different moves that you make right there. A bump and run, you come through and you have it to where you just nudge the guy up out of the way. A bump and dump is you go in there and you check him and he goes straight up the racetrack. and spins out. So that was not the case. If you look where Bubba started spinning out at, he was definitely in the process of trying to hook him. You could tell from the video and tell being there live that once, when you start turning sideways after the car is out from underneath you, when you're past the door and past everything else, and all of a sudden you start swerving to the left and the tail end whips around, he was definitely trying to hook him coming out of there. But that to me, the issue with it being a racing deal was overshadowed by the fact of the way that the track handled it after the fact.
Right.
A lot of people were disappointed in the way that the track handled that, with the first saying disqualified and then put to the back of the lead lap. But you just don't rip a checkered flag out of somebody's hands like that at a race of that magnitude. That was just, to me, was just an unfortunate circumstance in the way that the track handled that.
Totally agree. Had that been me, I mean, there was time. You had to think that already the idea was in place of to what the call was going to be. I mean, don't let him go to victory lane. I mean, don't even let him stop there. And for crying out loud, don't. He was into the full celebration. He was into the full everything that was going to happen there when they just pull that away and they come over on the PA and they do it. And I mean, I see Shane there talking about Robbie. I mean, it's a tough place to be in. It is a tough place to be in, because what do? I mean, do you let him? It goes to the Bill France thing, where Bill France said, I want people to leave the racetrack and know who the winner was. And I mean, when you find out who the winner was, I was trying to put myself in that spot. I mean, what would I have done? But what we don't know is, I mean, you get people in your ear, and Bobby, we know this. You get people in your ear at the racetrack, and they're telling you do that, and you do it right now. So I don't so much blame Robbie or anybody else. I just think, man, that could have been much more tactful on that deal.
It definitely could, and I don't hold Robbie responsible for that in terms, I mean, he's going by what he saw at the time. He was talking about Stephen Nasse winning that race. Stephen Nasse had won that race. I think Robbie and Bill, I think that it kind of fell on Bill there too, where a lot of people didn't like the way that Bill came up and did the interview, if they were going to yank it right away from him. But I think, I'm like you, I think if there's a question about it, don't let him get out. Don't let him have the celebratory,
Right.
hug and kiss
Right.
with the family. And Ricky Brooks still sat there with his little machine and double checked, make sure there was no kind of traction control in the driver's uniform. Don't let it even get that far.
Yeah.
If there's a question about it, have him pull up, tell him, hold on, it's under review.
Mm-hmm.
And they did at least say it was under review multiple times when he was getting out of the car. But at that point, you just don't let him get out of the car.
Yeah.
If it's still under review, don't let him get out of the car. Don't get him on the front stretch. Don't get him to start shaking hands and kissing babies.
And here's the other part about it, everybody. And I'm going to tell you one thing. And I leaned over and said this to you, Bobby, when that crap happened. I said, for one thing, Five Flags just set a precedent, because at some point, this is going to happen again. So you have to be consistent. Lord knows that is the number one thing that folks talk about with racetracks, to be consistent. So that happens again, you better be prepared to make that call once again. I mean, we can look at the Sunday race. The only difference is Derek didn't spin out. I mean, that's the only difference. It's the same move. It just wasn't at the end of the race. The second part of it, and Bobby, I was on and on about this, and of course on Saturday night, the more the more Bud Lights that I had, I was just really reaffirming, is because when folks talk about, well, we've never seen this before, we've never seen this call before, the whole difference is this happens every weekend. We talked about that. Here's what's different. Way back when, we didn't race like that. That's not the way you raced. And we heard it on SiriusXM. Dave Moody was going on and on about that. You can go back to the Mark Martins, the Jeff Burtons, and all of these guys. That's not how you raced. That wasn't the way that you raced the last lap, but that's the way you race it now.
But that's the way you race now. As we talked about it, it all changed back when there just wasn't trying to spin him out. I was just trying to rattle his cage. Between that right there and then the old Days of Thunder, Rubbins Racing.
Right.
That is when the whole way, and it's every division now, all the way from your entry-level class all the way up to your super late models. It's all that way now. And I think that it has been a seismic shift in the way that stuff gets handled, the way that the drivers try to, and you don't see the drivers policing themselves. Hell, everybody
Right.
raised a fit when Bubba Pollard and Stephen Nasse went after each other in the newspapers with stories with Matt Weaver and on Twitter. So it was one of those things to where, good God, the drivers, as we talked about on the way back in the day, you spun somebody out while they were leading, it self-policed itself, because as soon as that race is over, they came down there, they're going to whoop your ass.
Yeah, and that's the big difference. And for this to happen on that stage, and you get that result, the precedent is the thing that I'm talking about, because it is going to happen again. And there's a little part of me that was hoping that it would have happened Sunday. I mean, I didn't want Thorne to get spun out, especially since I picked him. I didn't want Majeski to get knocked out of there, but had that happen again on Sunday, that's where it was going to get really interesting, and see if the same call would have come around again. But that's really the big difference, is that is what you expect now all the time. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're at the NASCAR Cup level. It's exactly what you're saying, Bobby. You'll see it in the 4-cylinder class. You know it's coming. It's all in the manner that you do it. You talked about you said it, the bump and run versus the bump and dump. Obviously, if I'm the guy in second place, and I've done that move, and I've done it to where I want to do a bump and run, but damn it, I do a bump and dump. And I mean, what could Nassie have done different? Tap the roof and say it's on me at that race? I don't think so.
No, that's the biggest race of the year for the pro late models. I guess maybe the Masters of the Pros there at I-44 there in Lebanon, Missouri. Potentially that race could be a little bit bigger for the pro late models, but that Alan Turner trophy looks really good. It's almost as nice as a Tom Dawson trophy if you're one of those career pro late model racers. I mean, just ask Derek Thorne. He won that race last year and has that trophy proudly displayed up on his mantle. Mm-hmm. But it's a huge pro late model race. And it was a shame that the ending outshadowed that race, because that race, while there was some torn up equipment and some hurt feelings, that was actually a pretty damn good race.
Yeah, and the worst part about it was what you just said right there, is that you had the aftermath after that. I don't know if those cars if they hadn't wound up on each other, if that would have changed the call there. I think it's just one of those situations where Nassie, how much of it is Nassie, that call against him, because he's nasty. And I mean, you can't escape your past sometimes. So maybe that's what the case was right there. And for Steven, it turns out to be a double whammy, because he was really damn good in that damn snowball race, and he has that alternator problem again. And I saw him post on Facebook or Twitter today where he said he should have both of those trophies sitting in his house right now. And man, I got to tell you, I agree with him.
Yeah, his pro late model race was really good. Somebody replied to Matt Weaver. Jason Ford replied, and it so far has been the best tweet that I've seen in terms of describing the incident with Stephen Nassie. And it says, if it isn't Nassie that's DQ'd, or if it isn't Nassie, that isn't a DQ. But if Nassie hadn't been doing Nassie things for the last however many years down there, that isn't a DQ either. So a lot of times, sometimes your reputation precedes yourself. So that's one of those things where it comes up and says, that proves it right there, is the question about whether or not they DQ Stephen Nassie.
Yeah, well, I can totally tell you what Stephen Nassie did on Saturday evening was what a lot of guys and ladies do all around the country on a given Friday, Saturday night. I mean, there's a total legit move. I mean, I hate it. I mean, I hate it when that happens. I'm old, man. It's what I was telling you, Bobby. That's not the way you race. However, that is the way you race now. And there are certain guys, I mean, you may have some old timers that wouldn't do that, but I mean, I totally expect that. And when you go back and watch it, and it was nothing where Nassie didn't bonsai that thing in there. I mean, it was as clean as you can expect. If you want to call that move at all a clean way to do it, looked totally legit to me.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, you knew it was coming.
Absolutely.
We can't emphasize that enough, because as he was sitting there getting closer and closer, it seemed like his car was better in 3 and 4, Bubba was better in 1 and 2. Every time you see that happening, that's when you know that he's going to gain on him going down the backstretch. I thought he was actually going to be able to get close enough to do it a lap sooner, but he wasn't able to do it a lap sooner. So that was a good part to me. But coming down last corner, last lap, you just knew it was coming. He was close enough, and as soon as it happened, I don't think anybody was surprised about it.
No.
But some people were trying to act surprised about it in the grandstands. But nobody was surprised at all. Everybody's like, "Oh, that's nasty." But I still don't think it was an overly aggressive, overly dirty move. It was just the way that you do race. As you said, it's just the way that people race now in 2020.
Yeah, the only surprise of it was the call. I mean, that was really the big surprise. And I mean, I think that you were expecting Pollard to be mad. I mean, Pollard said, I mean, I'm sure he wasn't happy about it. I mean, I know he wasn't happy about it, especially the way Sunday wound up. But it's expected. It's part of what happens, and it is what it is. I mean, you can spin it whatever way you want. And hey, I love Bubba Pollard. I mean, we consider Bubba Pollard a friend. I mean, we've talked with him. We've had a beer with him. He's been on this program 3-4 times, whatever it's been. But Stephen Nasse did what he had to do. I mean, it's just what you do.
Yeah, I mean, so it was one of those. It was just happened to be one of the race things, and I hate the fact that that incident has overshadowed the entire race. It was a really good race there for the Snowflake 100 and the Alan Turner cars. So that was and talk about Alan Turner, man. Talk about the way that his company has sponsored Five Flag Speedway. He's just an iconic sponsor with them now, because you can't think about Five Flag Speedway without thinking about Alan Turner Hyundai.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to the snowball here, and remember, 7:30 we will have Phil Whipple on here. He's been the man that has been working with our committee along Race on Texas and Revved Up Sports Show to get the first ever 2020 Revved Up Sports Show Promoter of the Year. And we'll talk to Phil. He'll break all that down, and we'll announce who that is, and we'll figure out how we're going to get that person the hardware. So that's coming up at 7:30. I think before you dive into the snowball, the one thing that we have to really look at is when you have a last chance qualifier that has Chase Elliott, Augie Grill, Derek Griffith, Chandler Smith, Noah Gragson, what does that tell you about the 53rd Annual Snowball Derby?
That tells me that race is really hard to get into with your top just reading comments on Facebook, lost my train of thought.
We were talking about that. He tuned in too late. Jeremy, we've been giving all the love to Jake Johnson.
I think that it just shows how hard it is. You had Casey Johnson as well, who I thought was going to win the last chance race up in that race. So it just really shows how hard it is to qualify for the Snowball Derby when you have the names of that magnitude that are damn good racers. As we talked about it before, the lineup for the last chance race is an all-star race anywhere in the country. And that's that's the race that you got to do to try to get into the Snowball Derby. And so that was really surprising. I was really surprised to see Casey Johnson not make it. I thought he would end up doing better. That was his first time down at Pensacola, and the racing was a little bit different. But that was, I mean, Chase Elliott, he started 11th in that last chance race, and he, you got to give props to Chase Elliott. I'm sure we will in just a minute, but he really raced himself all day. Did a damn good job despite not winning that race. That was one hell of a job to come from where he came from to finish where he finished. But he came in there, and that you talk about a car that was on a rail. The way he came from the back to the front in that last chance race and them 50 lappers, that was impressive.
It really was. And Augie, I wanted Augie to win that race, man. What a beautiful wrap there on that car. That was so cool to see. And Augie not with the day that he wanted on Sunday, but he did. It was good to see, especially with the way that car was trimmed out. It was good to see Augie leading most of that LCQ with he and his dad on the hood. That was good to see. I did enjoy that. I wanted him to win that race, but Elliott just a little too much. And of course, you had Chandler Smith and everything that went on with that. And I like what Chandler Smith said was like, doesn't really matter about the phone thing. Hell, I was going to be in the LCQ anyway.
Yeah, it definitely was. I mean, his qualifying times weren't going to be good enough to get him to the top of the dance inside the top 30. So that to me was surprising that they made such a big deal about the disqualification. Now that was a disqualification straight up, just with having the phone inside the tech area. So it looks like somebody handed him his phone so he could start watching timing and scoring. And well, sometimes you just get the wrong stuff at the wrong time, but. That LCQ race, that last chance race was really, it was a pretty good entertaining show. Not as entertaining as it was a couple of years ago with Carson Hocevar and Burton and Rich Bickle and stuff like that. But I think it was the start time. We talked about that before. It really seems like the last chance races were actually considerably earlier than they have been, because that was a land rush to get out of that place after that last chance race, because there was about 2.5 hours to kill between the last chance race and the start of the Snowflake.
Yeah, and folks, hang around after we get done with after we talk to Phil, after we crown, we call it crown, after we crown our promoter of the year. I do want to have a discussion with obviously with you, Bobby, and with everybody else on here, because I want to talk about the trucks, and we've had modifieds, and of course we're talking about the Alan Turner Snowflake 100, the 53rd annual Snowball Derby there with the super late models. I want to have a little discussion about trucks, so we may run a little bit long, but I need some truck attention here when we get to that. So stick around. Don't buzz off of this thing after we get done with Phil Whipple. But we go to the Snowball, and man, I liked the 1 o'clock. I liked the 1 o'clock start a lot, and I think so much of that. I don't know. I didn't really realize that I had a preference of 1 versus 2 o'clock. We said noon when they thought that weather was coming, but man, that 1 o'clock start, it really made the day. They ran that race in 2 hours and 9 minutes. That's like a record. That's quick.
Well, that's got to be the fastest Derby on record.
Yeah, the fastest. Yeah.
The question was, is this the best field ever for the Snowball Derby? And it was indeed one of the best shows, probably one of the best fields in the last last decade or so. But if you really think about it, there were only 2 cautions for incidents on the racetrack. There was actually, I guess, technically 3, because there was one at the very end.
Yeah.
But you had the one within the first 25 laps, and then you had 2 or 3 competition cautions there for running the consecutive 75 green flag rates.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think there was at least 2, if not 3, I'm sure.
Yeah, and Jeremy points out right there. I mean, they have announced that it's going to be a 1 o'clock start time, and I think that's a really good time to start it. I mean, because you never know, because this race can take different directions, and I think what this does, if you're going to start at 1 o'clock, and you do have weather, you do have weather, and your announced time is 1 o'clock, you do have a little bit of time there to where you have to stretch this thing out. Then great. I mean, it affords you that, but. I mean, taking a look at that lineup, I mean, they take off, and Bobby, you said it. I mean, there was one of the things that you said, and I actually went in and made a note in my phone, and I make notes in my phone throughout the weekend as we're at one of these races. One of the things that you said that I thought really made it hit home, when we talk about the speed of this race, when we talk about 2 hours and 9 minutes in this race, and you didn't have a lot of incidents, you didn't have all this, mayhem. You had the stops at 75 laps for the consecutive laps. The reason for that was, I mean, people may say, the race sucked or whatever, because whatever. The talent in this race, that's when you appreciate the talent in this race, because you can sit there and run 75 laps 3 times and you ain't tearing shit up. It's the caliber of the driver.
Yeah, it definitely was one of the more impressive fields. And when you really think, there was not a lot of carnage in that race. There was a couple of instances that one hit with Boris Jurkovic in the very end. I think it was him and either Derek May or Derek Griffith, I think, got together there at the very end. Then you had the incident with Casey Roderick and Hunter Robbins. So that was one on a restart that you saw. But for the most part, there was not a lot of torn up race cars. There was a couple of bent fenders and a couple of bent in bumpers. But for the most part, all those cars were all loaded up on the trailer in one piece with not a lot of body damage on them.
Yeah, absolutely. So you go back to it, and Derek Thorne, I mean, you have to be. Ty Majeski finally wins this race, and Ty has found ways. I mean this not in a bad way. I mean, Ty will tell you himself, because we've talked to him on the Saturday show. He's found ways to lose this race. He found a way to win this race this past weekend, and now Derek Thorne will take the mantle of, man, finding ways to not win this race. He's the best. I mean, he wins a pole for both races, and he is by far the best car in this race on Sunday. But then when it comes time to go to the pay window, everything falls apart. And to watch Ty Majeski, to watch him walk that 43 car down, that was a work of art right there. Where Ty Majeski, yeah, Thorne's car has fallen off, but Majeski, you want to talk about white knuckle, getting on that car. That was beautiful what we saw Ty Majeski do.
Yeah, it was a great race. I mean, in terms of as well as he was running, Derek Thorne, he whooped their ass all day.
He did.
We were talking about it in the grandstands. He made some of those other guys look silly.
I think it was 255 laps, Bobby. 255 laps out of 300 he led.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And of course he didn't lead the last 5, which was the most important. But when you think about the calibers of drivers that he put a lap down early, I mean, Bubba Pollard, I mean, he was 2 laps down early.
Fast.
Like really, really early. And same thing with Augie Grill, but Augie decided not to pull it in like Bubba did. So, but that was, I mean, he really put an ass whooping on him. As you said, it was going to be his race to lose in terms of having to make a mistake. And I don't know if he made any mistakes. I think he let the 91 get a little close. There was a little bit of contact, a little bit of a bump and run there. There with about 10 laps to go, but Majeski had a buzz about that place, because when he got past a couple of those lap cars that were there and he was able to move into second, it was like, oh crap, here he comes. And then he caught him and passed him underneath the green, and that was really, it was a showcase of driving. But you got to feel for Derek Thorne. I mean, after dominating as much as he did, if it was the Snowflake 250, he'd have been the champion already, or the Snowball 250. Just like they said, there's been a lot of winners of the Daytona 400, but there's not too many winners of the Daytona 500.
His time is coming. It's going to be really quick, because he was the class of the field right there. But Majeski, he and we were listening where he talked about, they always miss the setup a little bit the first part of the race, but they battled back, and we have to give. I mean, I know Chase Elliott is. I know he's the NASCAR champion, and folks are going to say whatever they want to say about the Cup Series, but he did a hell of a job too, because he was mired back there for quite a bit. He comes back to third. Chandler Smith, hell of a drive right there as he comes home fourth. And Caden Honeycutt, back to him again. A fifth place run. Fifth place, when you see fifth place for him on the stat sheet, that really does not indicate how good he was. That was a top 2 car for most of the day.
Yeah, he was running in the top 5 pretty much all day. And that was actually, he faded late there towards the end, in the middle part of that second competition. Costin dropped back in the top, later in the top 10. I think he was running 8th or 9th, kind of right there with Kyle Busch. But for him to rebound and get himself a top 5 finish in his first Snowball Derby in the longest race he's ever run, I think that just shows that the kid's just got the ceiling. The ceiling is going to get broken here pretty soon for this kid, and he's going to start going places. This won't be the last time you ever hear the name Caden Honeycutt being competitive in a super late model.
Hey, no doubt about that. There's no doubt about that. Cole Butcher, 6th place car, and that's another one. Cole Butcher just kind of sat there as I was doing updates for the Texas Short Track Racing Series page, and I found myself typing Cole Butcher most of the day, and it was a very quiet run for him. But he comes home 6th. Kyle Busch is 7th. Then you go to Grant Enfinger, where he kind of makes his way in there, and he's here on the stat sheet. Derek Griffith and Kyle Plott. But just star-studded top 10 right there, and a good race. And I did see it earlier where somebody said, when you want to talk about a bump and run, I don't think what Majeski did there with Thorne wasn't a bump and run. That was just where he kind of he just moved him a little bit. I mean, that wasn't a bump. That was a very orchestrated racing move right there, and that's you put the front end of the back bumper and you just slide him out of the way. That's exactly what we saw right there. That is the coolest way to do it right there.
Yeah, that was, and there was the talk about the fact that Derek Thorne ran down a little bit low there when Ty was trying to get past. But then wasn't that last restart exciting? Because as soon as those two lined up on the front row, you're sitting there wondering, well, Chase Elliott's lining up third. Are they going to get together, and is the world going to just go bananas when Chase Elliott passes 3 wide for the lead or something like that?
Yeah.
But let's talk about the effect that Chase Elliott had on this race. Obviously, he brought a lot of eyes to it that were never there. You were sitting there when we were in that Jake Motorsports compound there on Sunday morning. There was 2 people that was walking from the fairgrounds. They both had their Chase Elliott hoodies on. And I jokingly asked them, I said, so who do you guys got for today's race? And they, jokingly said back,
Kyle Busch.
They were going to go for, the Kyle Busch, right? And so they were joking. And then the question came up to them, and I asked them, I said, so just out of curiosity, were you guys already coming to this race, or did you guys decide to come to this race when you found out Chase Elliott was coming to this race? And one guy said he'd been there before, and the woman that was with him said that this was their first Snowball Derby, but they made the decision to come to the Snowball Derby after they found out Chase Elliott was going to race in it. And I'm going to guarantee that those were not just the only 2 people that happened to.
Yeah, I mean, look, say what you want. I mean, it just so happens that it was Chase Elliott, but let's say Martin Truex was the Cup champion and showed up to run in Pensacola. We'd see the same thing. Maybe not to that magnitude, but there were times where I looked around that place and my first thought was, what pandemic? But my second thought was, look what these NASCAR Cup guys are bringing to this place. And that was a well-attended race. That was a very well-attended race, but you have to feel that impact was there because of both of those guys. I mean, Chase and Kyle, because a lot of people like Kyle. A lot of people don't like Kyle. But, the weird thing about it is, Bobby, we can talk about NASCAR rivalries all we want, and Dale Earnhardt and Darrell Waltrip, people, Rusty Wallace, people that didn't like them. But it's so weird to where it's like wrestling. It's like pro wrestling to where there's a wrestler that you don't like, you go to watch him. And even if you don't like Kyle Busch, he fills the stands.
There's a lot of people that go to watch Kyle Busch lose as many people that go to watch him win a race, right? He's super polarizing.
Right.
And so I think that there was definitely a lot of people that came through and were pulling against him. There was definitely Kyle Busch fans in the stands.
Sure.
It was great when you went through there and could see when Chase Elliott passed cars, the grandstands were shaking. When Kyle Busch was passing cars, the grandstands were shaking. When Kyle Busch was getting passed, the grandstands were shaking. You looked to the left and to the right, people got their fist up in the air, yelling and hollering. So it was every time those two guys made passes, that it had an effect on that crowd, and that's when you know they bring a special element to that race that you just don't have in other races.
And how about it when you talk to those guys? I mean, Chase is third, Kyle is seventh. But you get out there, Ty Majeski wins. That was the first time I saw a stat. I think it was, I can't quote the year. I think the mid-'90s. It was like since the mid-'90s that left-hander had not won at the Snowball Derby. When you get these guys out here, you get all these guys that were beating them. And I know we can look at the final results. And, yeah, Chase is third, Kyle is seventh. But for most of that day, there were a lot of these guys that we call our super late model racers, our late model racers that were beating them all day. And that speaks to the caliber of these drivers that we watch in these, I mean, regional, I guess we can call it regional series, whatever we want to call it. But they beat the best in the business. When you get those two showing up, because that's two of the best. That's two, and you throw Enfinger in there also. That's the best guys right there.
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a lot of influence. When you got to figure a guy like Noah Gragson, who was a winner in the Xfinity Series, won the Snowball Derby before it, he doesn't make it.
Yeah.
Right? He missed it by one spot. He finished fifth in the LCQ, and so that was one of those to where he just didn't make the field. He didn't get it on qualifying, but that deal did kind of come together pretty late, so that really wasn't that surprise with the Richie Waters stuff and ended up missing that race. But those guys, the quality of cars in that field was just probably top-notch. And it was just a fun and entertaining race, and it was that race was an example of why you go to Florida the first week in December and why the Snowball Derby is so special. That race proved it right there this weekend because it had every single thing we were looking for.
If you went to that race or watched it, I mean, I don't know what the coverage looked like, but if you went to that or if that didn't get you going, we need to have a conversation. There's something wrong with you. You need like a transfusion or transplant of something, because that was as good as it gets. Before, I know Phil Whipple's set for 7:30, and he'll call it 7:29 and 30 seconds. With Bubba Pollard, obviously we talked about him there in the pro race, but in that Snowball Derby, man, he was yikes. That was rough. He makes the move over there with Van Doren. And I obviously you expect more out of him, and you expect some growing pains with a new team. The Van Doren car have been pretty good. I mean, they've been pretty good, but that was Bubba. We heard about some of the radio chatter there with Bubba, and that right there. I mean, what's next? Does he go back to? You got to go back to Seneca. I mean, what's next?
You know, that's a very interesting question right there, and I'm not sure I know the answer to it. But the radio chatter, he was not very complimentary of the equipment that he was racing with there on Sunday afternoon, that's for sure. He did not have a lot of good positive things to say about the Van Dorn equipment, and so it's I don't know how you go back to Seneca. Apparently some of the Seneca cars have been sold already. Michael Atwell apparently has purchased one or is going to take one, and then so I know Bubba's got a couple of them. So we'll see. I mean, it's going to be once you burn a bridge, and we don't know if he totally burned a bridge
we don't know
with
how
Seneca
that
or
ended.
not.
Yeah.
We don't know the ins and outs of that, but sometimes it's hard to go back. It's kind of like breaking up with a girlfriend. If you go find somebody else and it's not as good as what you think, it's not always as easy. They may not always be as willing to want to take you back.
And I love the comment on the Facebook feed. I don't know. I mean, I had Gragson in. I posted something on the Texas Short Track Racing Series page about that Gragson would be in on the provisional. I don't know why he wasn't, because Braden was in on speed. So I really don't know the answer to that question. Maybe he didn't want it. I mean, I don't know. I mean, hell, that was what I was wondering. But Bubba Pollard will be the interesting question now. I mean, we're getting ready to head. We'll go to the World Series coming up in February over at New Smyrna, and we've seen him in the David Rogers car there at New Smyrna. So I don't know if maybe that's what he's going to do, or if he comes back with his cars, with the 26 or however that's going to be structured. But that was amazing to look up and see both he and Augie Grill to be. I mean, that was a 50, 75 lap mark there, and those guys are going a lap down, and Augie did it a little different. Like you said, Augie kept on and wound up 21st, and Bubba's like, I'm done. I'm done.
Yeah, it wasn't long after he got lapped for the second time. He was like, that's it, I'm calling it, I'm done. But Augie was able to kind of go through. Augie, though, he just didn't have luck all weekend. It seemed like everything he got in had issues. He didn't have good issues with the modified. Not exactly sure what he broke on the modified, but he definitely had issues all weekend, and it was kind of sad to see because racing for his dad, racing in the memory of his dad and stuff, Frankie and stuff like that. But I don't think that Augie had the weekend he was looking for. So hopefully he'll get that changed around as they start the new year in 2021.
Yeah. So we'll follow that and see how all that shakes out. But stick around, friends, because we do have some more snowball talk. Still got to talk about South Texas Speedway. You got a big show coming up after a big show this past weekend, but we've been talking about for about a month and a half just a great idea that came to pass, that came to us. It is the Texas Short Track Promoter of the Year, and I will seriously say that this is the brainchild of a great dude, our man Phil Whipple, the old Northerner there, that old Yankee that has become such a staple in Texas racing. We're going to the Revved Up Sports Show hotline. We bring him in. It is our man Whipple. How you doing, brother?
I am doing very well. Good evening, Bobby. So good to be with you gentlemen tonight.
Absolutely. So, Phil, but before we jump into that, I mean, tell folks, I really liked how you. I mean, you didn't have to sell me. I mean, if you come to me with an idea, I'm going to buy it hook, line, and sinker. But your thoughts on this? I mean, folks just don't understand how hard it is for promoters.
No, they don't have any idea, I don't think, how much is involved and how much time and effort it takes just to pull off a successful, smooth, well-organized weekly show, much less a whole season or an entire season during a pandemic year, especially. There's just so much that they have to do. And it's been sticking in my head for a number of months now throughout 2020, that, in particular in this year, that I think each year there's one of those individuals throughout that huge, vast state of Texas and all the great short track racing that goes on down there that rises above the rest, and that really ought to be recognized for those efforts. That one thing, whether they do it infrastructure related or the promotion of a certain division, the growth of classes, the going out of the way to maybe have some kart racing going with an eye towards the future of the sport. There's so many different elements that can be recognized. I just really felt very strongly was that there was always be one or a pair of promoters on each given year that would, like I say, rise above the rest and deserve recognition. And I did kind of come to you, buddy, and try to sell it to you. And I want to thank you right off the bat. Before there's my even committee members I need to thank, but I need to thank you and Chris David right off the bat, Rodney, for going with this, because I thank you for agreeing with it, because you, above and beyond anybody, you guys, with all your relationships with those tracks in that huge state, know the effort that has to go into all that. And so you knew I was onto something, that there is somebody going to be recognized each year. And so we're going to pass this thing around and really look at it each year and examine what the individual things these people do, how that fits the criteria, and pick one good one each year. And man, it's going to be a wonderful pleasure experience. I just so glad that you go with it, my friend.
Absolutely.
So, Phil, what was some of the stuff that was talked about in the room? Obviously, you don't have to reveal every secret, but it seemed like every time that I kept hearing you guys were close, something came up and you thought, well, maybe this other person should win it. And it seemed like the conversation went back and forth a long time. But what were some of the main factors that you guys were looking for in terms of determining who was going to be the promoter of the year?
That's a great question, Bob. You're right. It did draw out a little longer because we had longer conversations than were anticipated about the various candidates. I mean, we had some really heavy-hitting candidates here. Mm-hmm. And the boys, my four highly credentialed veteran, and I think I'm going to keep them anonymous, members of the selection committee. They took this so seriously. They met one or two nights a week for week after week after week with these conversations, and really took this to in depth. You know, they looked at guys like Randy Ross Edwards, what he's done carrying on the tradition at Devilsville. They looked at KR Promotions, the two Kevins, Kevin Rogers and Kevin Sestare at RPM, what they've done there. I mean, they had some wicked nominees, and they kept discussing applying each to the criteria. Okay, how are the classes, the health of the classes at that particular track? How's fan satisfaction? They took the time to reach out to some fans. Now, these guys are from different parts of the state, these members of the committee, so they're in touch with a lot of different fan bases and groups. So they reach out and got some fan feedback as well. And how's the fan satisfaction rate there going this year? And then are they doing anything with karting? Are they keeping an eye towards the future? We looked at all the criteria, and that's why the conversations did sort of drag out some. And then I drew a line in early December and said, guys, we've had some great discussions here, but we got to start voting. We'll come to a time where we got to vote. And they did, and they just handled that so well. I thought at that point, those guys that were going to fly 2,000 miles north and kick the shit out of me, but they didn't. They were very civil. They said, all right, Mr. Whipple, well, it's time to vote. And they did, and they came to a nice consensus, and it was such a wonderful process, a little longer than I anticipated, but the guys in the end were gentlemen. They were intelligent. They were articulate about it. I got to thank you another time, Rodney, for you and Chris David for the 4 credentialed veterans that you guys gave me to moderate over in the selection committee, because they not only took it seriously, they like badgered each other, and they said, well, how about this, and look at this, and how about this guy? They took it right to the detail that more than I ever expected, really. So as a moderator, those guys made my job easier by the depth of conversations and discussions they had with it. So I was blessed to have you guys give me the guys you gave me on the committee. I simply oversaw them, set up the protocol, the quorum for the discussions and the stuff, and we kept reminding them of the criteria and oversaw it. And then in the end, I said, gentlemen, it's time to vote. And we did, and lo and behold, we came up with a winner. And so what a blessing it was to be a part of. A little time consuming, so I'll thank those individuals, those anonymous, well-credentialed members of that committee for all the time they put into it and the effort and the depth that they took it. It was no easy process, and I'd like your listeners to know right now, they all took it. They didn't take it lightly. They took it very seriously. Next year, we'll look at other nominees and assess the criteria and such. And pretty sure another individual or a pair of promoters kind of thing will have their opportunity to shine. But I want this to be coveted. It is really, because these guys are in the know, knowledgeable, long-time guys, and they don't just pick this willy-nilly. So I was kind of privileged to be a part of it, to be the moderator. And again, I thank you guys for that opportunity.
Well, and I think the thing is, Phil, when we really look at that, because when you came to me, my first, and Chris David checks in, said you did an amazing job handling this, and you did, especially with these people that we're talking about it. And I had a lot of folks that were like, well, who's a committee? And I don't really think we need to get into that. I mean, we don't need to. It's those folks, because my comment to you was, and I know when I talked to Chris and we all started talking, I'm like, look, I have relationships with all of these folks, and I while at the same time I don't think that it would be a bad thing. You just never know, and that's what we were trying to avoid. But so Phil, tell me, what is it with you? I mean, you. It's guys like you. Texas, we've struggled, and I don't think it's so much that we've struggled with the racing. It's to put our footprint down. What is it with you that just excites you about Texas, especially talking now through all of this? I bet it's these folks that put these race shows on.
Oh man, that's quite a question right there. What is it excites me that has me so passionate about the Texas racing scene, to the point where I would even get involved in something like this, for example, some random thing where I felt an award hadn't been created and needed to be created and see through and put it all together and got it awarded and got it stuck out. And I don't know, it's a number of factors. Chappie's laughing at me. I can hear him already. Bobby's like, listen, I don't know, dude. Last year, I was all enamored with the food and the hospitality and the racing, too. This year, I don't know. I see myself down the road getting involved in administrative or something, a little more than perhaps what I'm doing now. But yeah. I like the fact that it's having a resurgence down there. I'm seeing in Texas what I saw starting in 2015 up here now. I'm seeing promoters working together. I'm seeing race teams realizing they need to play under unified rules with level playing fields. I'm seeing guys realize down there that the sport was sort of swirling in the bowl maybe, and that maybe things ought to kind of come around administrative-wise to salvage it and save it. And so you have great things going on now with that USRA makes a presence, and then IMCA still having a strong one. You have Pittman working with Mary Ann. You have all these relationships cultivating now, and they're smart ones, and they work together on the scheduling. And you talk about rules and having heavy hitter fall events and spring events, and top loading their schedules, not doubling up the central part of the schedule so guys can chase weekly points and not affect the weekly car count, but having those special shows in the spring and the fall and not putting them on top of one another. I guess I just like the transformation and resurgence I'm seeing down there. I just came into it, remember, last year, and you guys were kind of starting to enjoy that, and then you really did this year because there wasn't a whole lot else going on in the game, right? Now the rodeos and all that shit was not happening. So to me, short track racing jumped and surged this year down there. So that resurgence has got another big shot in the arm this year, and I'm just excited about it. I'd like to continue to play a small role, publicist and journalistic wise, if I could, in that resurgence down the road. I know that's a long answer, Rodney, and I'm sorry for that, but
no.
Those are some of the things that excite me, my friend.
That's passion, and that's what I like.
All right, so Phil, now comes the fun part. It looks like it's now time for you to introduce the first ever Race on Texas Revved Up Sports Show Promoter of the Year. So let's play some music.
We got to give you the big sound. And again, Phil is going to announce this, but remember, Phil was the moderator of this, so don't beat him up. don't beat anybody up. This was and I do, Phil. I know, because these guys would message me, and I'm like, leave me the shit out of it. I don't know nothing. You guys are working on what you're working on. But all right, we got to give you the breaking news sounder right here. All right, here we go.
All right, have we got it?
You're good.
Oh, we're good. This is the breaking news bulletin from RUSS, the Revved Up Sports Show. Are you listening? Are you tuned in, Texas race fans? Tonight's the night. Here it is. It's your 2020 Texas Short Track Promoter of the Year, the inaugural recipient, Mr. Owen Pittman of Texana Raceway Park in Edna, Texas. Owen, congratulations. Veteran credentialed member of the selection committee came to a nice solid agreement on you, sir, 3-1, and then eventually the one conceded. Pretty much a unanimous admiration for what you achieved, the transformation of that facility down there in Edna this year. Congratulations, sir. A very well-deserved recipient, I think, this year, my friend.
Man, Phil, and I know there was a lot of support for Gina, and I mean, I work with Owen and Gina, but I think that Gina, it was just so amazing to watch what she's done. We talked about Mary Ann and 105 and just everyone. I mean, Heart of Texas, and I think like even when you look at the folks at Heart of Texas, it's like we're just so used to doing what they do. It's not really a big deal that they pull off yet another season.
That's right. No, there's so many. You're right. So many good candidates do. This was a difficult task, to say at the very least. That's an understatement. What the two Kevins have done at RPM, what Gina has done down there to keep pavement racing alive. That's weird to me too. It was a little difficult for me to just sit by, as mouthy as I am and talkative as I am, to sit by as a quiet moderator and let these boys have at it when I kept on saying, but how about, and think about, and how about, and I have a lot of shit I could have said, but I let them do their jobs because they're the Texans and they know the shit and they're the committee members. And I didn't even have to cast a tie-breaking vote. As a moderator, I just oversaw the deal and didn't even have to cast a tiebreaker in this instance. But yeah, a lot of guys to look at, a lot of good candidates for years down the road. And even you could look at good turn series people too. And I may even, by the way, sort of petition that we expand a little bit beyond Texas borders too, because dudes, we never even really thought about and talked about the effort that Dylan Scott made over at the Dirt on the Rev, right?
Absolutely.
We used to we could have very well easily looked at what Dylan did, and I don't think the state of Louisiana is going to do a Louisiana short track program. So we could have looked at what Dylan did over there too, and on it goes on and on. I mean, try to expand the scope a little bit for next year, but no, it was a hell of a process, buddy, and one I was honored to be a part of.
Yeah. So let's talk about Promoter of the Year. Let's talk about Owen Pittman. And with him, I mean, he was late to the game here. Just a great facility. I can tell you, I'm so honored that I got the call to go there, because to me that little joint right there kind of takes me back to what I grew up watching when it comes to short tracks. But You want to talk about that guy, Phil? I have been to that track, and I see him wearing a race director headset. I see him with a microphone in his hand. Before that, he's out there watering the damn racetrack, and I mean, he's got the sheep's foot out there, and then later on, he's over there flagging the carts, and I mean, he's just doing so many things. And this is not anything new to him. This is obviously not a new concept to him, but to you talk about the Phoenix Rising. He pulled that place out of the damn woodwork and made a hellacious season out there in Edna.
And he went way beyond, I think, the turnaround was way beyond what any of us could have projected. It wasn't just bring it back up to a so-so status. He went through the moon with the place. Look at the car counts and the numbers he had, the fan count. Good Lord, he went well above and beyond, I think, the expectations that any of us could have set for him there. And it's amazing to see. The way he wears all his hats, the philosophy that he had. I said to somebody that I had an in-depth phone conversation with him this year, writing a feature on him and what he was doing down there. And it was like talking to the late, great Tom Curley. It was nuts. It was the philosophies that were coming out of the man's mouth. And, well, I think I feel this and I feel this about that. He has some really good big picture philosophies on how short track racing ought to be and how it runs. And I wouldn't be surprised, really, it's not my place to say, but he has a little reduction in the number of classes down there, 2021. One of his pet peeves, as we'll tell you, is long, drawn-out programs. In fact, you've seen me, Rodney, and the way I fought my gums. I'm trying to make a big move for dirt track racing down there to kind of get rid of some of the redundancy in the classes, tighten up the programs a little bit, and start knocking them all out in 3.5 hours. And I think from what I've seen, that's on the mind of other people as well. And Owen's huge on that. So talking to that guy, seeing how he operates, seeing the factors he knows in a good, successful show, he's a sharp cat. I have nothing but huge admiration for him.
Yeah, totally agree.
So, Phil, now that we know who the winner is, let's go back and talk about some more of the criteria that the committee went to look at. Obviously, we hit it on it a little bit, but now that we know the winner, let's talk about how the winner was able to fill in the gaps of some of the different criteria that you guys were looking for.
Absolutely. We were kind of looking at three different categories overall. Health of the current divisions that the track was running, size of fan count, spectator count, and how steady was it, and also any activities that they were doing to build for the future, whether it was promotions to draw in new fans or maybe go-karting program, which was kind of one of the things where Owen excelled in, is his karting program and his eye towards the future. We felt that demonstrates quite an eye towards the future to keep bolstering that karting program and getting those kids interested and stuff. And of course, he oversaw the play at L87 at Lawrence's place as well and kind of spearheaded that program too. And so I think he definitely gets it as far as getting kids involved and having an eye towards the future. And from the individuals I talked to personally, the crowd, there was no shortage of fans there. And I think, Rodney, the times you announced there, you should be able to back that up. I think the Classic was packed, right? So, of course, that's a special event in the fall. But I think he did pretty well fan-wise weekly, too. And so that was really the three big categories, probably, that specifically answer you was health of the divisions that were running and whether those racers were bitchy or happy about they were racing. And boy, with the numbers that guy had there this year, they certainly couldn't have been unhappy if they wouldn't have been coming back in the numbers that they were doing. That pretty much speaks for itself. And so they had to kind of pool the fans and see if they were getting their money's worth, and it was the food good and so forth. And there again, that eye towards the future. And so, and man, he hit a home run in all those categories from my perspective.
Yeah, I can absolutely tell you that in talking to drivers, whether it be on track or off the track there, the times that I was there, I mean, they were just, so excited about the program he ran. And I think a lot of that as well, Phil, was folks talking about Owen. It was like, well, he can kind of be an ass at times, but that's part of the thing. I mean, it's so hard because being a race promoter, you have to do the PR and you have to do everything because you got to attract these people in, but people as in drivers and teams. But part of that is too, I mean, you can be everybody's friend, but when it's time to get down to the show, you got to put that friendship aside. And Owen does a really good job with that because he's got a lot of racing friends, but when it's time to get to the business, he's just doing his job.
Well, that's exactly right. That's a double-edged sword, brother, because you wear those two hats, promoter and then a race director / organizer. So on the first hand, you busted your butt to draw all these people in here, right?
Yep.
And then you get that promoter hat off. Then now you've got to give them a good, efficient show. And so you're right. Then you've got to become authoritative with the guys that are buying pit passes and putting on the show for you. Then you've got to show some authority with those guys that are basically and if it passes, putting on the stroke for it in a fair, decent manner, and bark at him and kick the stroke on and make sure your officials are doing their job.
Yeah.
Right, and then get kind of be the prick from that point on to the night to make sure those people you drew there are going to get the show that you promised them, and then a fair show, and everybody gets paid and goes home happy, right? So, it's two big hats you got to wear and do them both real well. And the man seems to be able to do it and never really shows to be all stressed out. Now his family might tell you different, or some friends that know him close may tell you he vents once in a while or something, and I would fully suspect that he would at some point. But he seems to handle that stress of managing that kind of thing very well.
Yeah, he really does. He really does. So congratulations to Owen Pittman, our 2020 Race on Texas Revved Up Sports Show Texas Short Track Promoter of the Year, and Chris David chimed in there. We'll have we've got a great trophy for him. We had talked about, Phil, so get this, I know we had talked about that either Chris or I or both of us and Bobby would maybe go to the track banquet and do that, and I was at the Clash. Owen told me, he said, you're gonna give out all the trophies at intermission. So I'm thinking, well, hell, if he wins, when the hell are we going to present it to him?
Yeah, presented a funny little circumstance for us, but we assure Mr. Pittman we'll get him that nice award, and that's not a bad problem to have when you think about it.
Yeah, we'll have to figure out a time to get that to him, and we'll get pictures up and so forth. But Phil, my man, thanks so much for the confidence in Race on Texas and Chris and Bobby and I to pull this off, and most importantly, thank you for your leadership on this, because you had some egos you had to deal with there, my brother, and you did a hell of a job with it.
Well, thank you very much. I stayed civil. I let them go at each other. There was no blood drawn or anything, and so I didn't have to get out the first aid kit. They made me laugh, but also I got to say, to sum up, it was educational. They taught me a lot too about what you should look at it, and taught me a lot about different promoters down there. It's going to be a continuing educational process each year to have these guys involved. I'll sum up by thanking them and thanking you as well, Rodney. So thank you for your time tonight, guys. It was an honor to be a part of this process. Those guys got to be recognized, and I'm just honored to be a part of it.
Yep, absolutely, and we'll keep it going. Phil, thanks so much for the dedication, my man. Let's catch up soon, and hopefully we'll get to congregate at some point.
All right, I sure hope we can. Thank you for your time, gentlemen, and great show tonight. Thanks for your time. Good night.
You bet. Take care, my man. So there it is. Owen Pittman, your promoter of the year, and that, great choice. Great choice. He's a racer. Some of the best promoters are past racers and racing folks, and Owen, it really is. Just a hell of a job he did there, because that place, man, they had it going. You saw the Clash, Bobby. It was, that's prime time right there.
Yeah, I think the way that he was able to come as late to the game as he did, made the decision to go USRA sanction there for the factory stocks, and went ahead and paid part of that because it was late fees and stuff that was going on for the factory stocks, based upon the timetable when he took over. But just a great show with as many hats as he wears around that racetrack, for everything from race director to running the water truck, helping with the go-karts, cleaning the bathrooms, trying to find toilet paper for some of the different stalls. He's done it all, had every single hat wore on, and as the year progressed, Texana became one of the places that you wanted to go race.
Yeah,
and that
really,
you wanted to go watch.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just a great show. Congratulations, Owen. You are the man, brother. And I learned a lot from him this year. To watch, and again, just a great field of, say, competitors, just a great field of promoters that, and this isn't a competition. This is just one where these folks really took it in, and they had to hammer this thing out. I did hear a little bit of the back and forth, and it wasn't easy. But they were able to figure it out. So before we check out of here, I told folks to hang around. I don't know how many people did. They may have to catch it on podcast, but I want to tell. I spoke till I was blue in the face over there at Pensacola this weekend, because obviously, Bobby, we sit there and we watch. You've got the Modifieds of Mayhem that do just a tremendous job with the Modifieds, and we watch the Alan Turner Pro Late models. They kind of piggyback there with the Southern Super Series, and you have all of these different organizations or series, whatever you want to call and you'll agree. The trucks are left out. The trucks are left out. They had kind of fallen off at some point. They started, they built back up again, but there just wasn't anything there, and trucks are kind of left out of things when it comes to stuff like that.
Yeah, they have been. It's not as they're not as popular as they once were across the Southeast, and the way that it's sad to see. But at one point, you had 20 or 30 cars at places like Pensacola and at Mobile and at Houston Motorsports Park. So at one point, the trucks were the class to be, and it just seems like they've fallen off just a little bit. It seemed like once Houston kind of fell to the wayside, the trucks lost some of the glamorous stuff that they had before.
So I was, having those conversations with people, and then it's funny. I got a call from Gina a little bit earlier, and I guess she was like reading my mind or something. So Gina has been presented with an opportunity for trucks to possibly have something set up to where there could be a traveling truck series, whether it be to where trucks could possibly run in Texas, Florida, and Alabama, Mississippi, all this whole Gulf Coast thing, kind of something structured to what the Cars Tour does. With the Cars Tour, what do they call their 12? It's the what is that? It's
the traveling 12 that they got.
The traveling 12, possibly something like that. She's apparently been offered some money there for a purse and all of that, but what that's going to require would be go to carstour.com and take a look at that. So this is something to where it could maybe take this truck series and kind of grow it to where it could be something like that. You'd have your races at Houston and then the various other spots in other states. But I think what Gina would like to see, and again, I know it's hard to say, is the commitment part, because that's always, if I hear this idea, I'm like, yep, I'm in. But, seriously, sit back and relax and take all this in and figure out if this is something that could work. But I think that this could be something really good for trucks.
I think so. You heard it here first. Gulf Coast Super Trucks. That's what I'm aiming for it to be called. That's my name for it. If my name and my marketing skills come up anywhere, Gulf Coast Super Trucks. That looks like that'd be a good name to get fans in the stands, and it's also a good time to do it too. You got a lot of momentum. Everybody knows that Texas is back on the map, because if it starts with trucks, it could end with late models, super late models, and even more modifieds.
And what this is set up to be is exactly like a Cars Tour model. Apparently, Gina told me that she talked to Jack McNelly, and I'm like, okay, I hadn't heard this before. She talked to Jack McNelly, that's the Cars Tour right there. Because what the Cars Tour actually do is they set up, whether it be discounted, there's discounted tire stuff. There's a lot of discounted stuff for teams that opt in to be a part of whatever the series would be. But what I like about this, and again, I had this discussion with a lot of people this weekend, is the trucks are the ones that don't have this. And I think that this could truly be something to where it would be beneficial for everyone, because Texas has a really good contingent of trucks. Of course, the challenge for the Texas teams would be you'd have to travel to be a part of the series, because at the same time you go to like Five Flags, for example, that they're a little off on their trucks right now because they don't have that count. I know that there's tracks in between, but I think what this could really do is really bring it to a forefront for the series, and there'd be a purse that would be paid, for final season standings in this. We're not going to say 12. I don't think it would be a 12 race series, but those top 10 or top 5, whatever was determined, they'd be paid that. But at the same time, you would still, if you're racing at Houston, let's just say Houston, for example, you would still accumulate your state points and your track championship points and all of that. So I think it's something good. So what folks need to do is reach out to Gina and let's pass this thing around and see if it's something that I would love to be a part of, something where we make the trucks be something like the Modifieds of Mayhem, the pro late models and super late models. And quite frankly, honestly, in my dark mind that thinks way ahead of time, you team something like this up with the Modifieds of Mayhem, that's a hell of a show at whatever track.
Yeah, it surely is. Back in the day, you saw how successful it was when you got to see the trucks the old Arch trucks racing with the USRA super late models, and even when they teamed up the trucks and the modifieds together to run all across the, back when we had more than one asphalt track. So we've seen it work before. The trucks are very special in Texas because, as you like to call it, it's the official car of the great state. And so being able to expand the way that the truck series is seen, both on a local scale, a regional scale, and hell, even a national scale, if you're able to get a touring series based upon the trucks with here in Alabama and Florida and even maybe even a Mississippi track here and there.
Sure, absolutely. I want it born here. So reach out to Gina. Hell, reach out to me. I mean, I can be in direct communication with her, but it would be something set up similar to what the Cars Tour do with their Touring 12. But commitment. Got to have firm commitments. That is the main thing that she drove home to me. So we have a huge race coming up at South Texas Speedway. Coming up this weekend, the 10th through the 12th. It is the the STXR Bash at the Beach. That looks like that's going to be some kind of fun right there.
Well, as if one big show down at South Texas Speedway is not enough, now we end up having a second big show down at South Texas Speedway. So if you had a chance, if you ran away to run down to Pensacola to watch the big races down there, and you want to go in and watch another big race, that would be a good one to go to with the Bash at the Beach. Sounds like a really good old wrestling show.
Yeah, it does. And I can tell you that I did talk to Stephen Whitaker today, to Stevie, and $2,500 to win per night for the IMCA Modifieds. They've already got 45 of those registered, so that's a pretty good little entry list right there as we sit here on Wednesday, the 9th, with everything starting tomorrow. Factory stocks will run for $1,250 a night. The limited modifieds, they will run topless again. I love that, topless. And they'll run for $1,250. Scott Bloomquist. So that's a guy right there that's going to bring some folks to the turnstiles.
Yeah, no, definitely will be a way. Obviously, you've got the main superstar down there, main superstar in dirt, or at least has been for quite a little bit of time. And so it'll be good to see him race against the locals down there and even some of the heavy hitters that come all across the region. Yeah.
It's going to be fun. So from the Jerry Whitaker number 2, the second annual race this past weekend, Dalton Faulkner wins in the factory stocks. That dude right there, what can you say about him? I'm sure he'll be back this weekend. He wins over Tommy Davis Jr., Rodney White, Ben Miklachek, and Greg Carlucci Jr. in the limited modifieds. They raced on Sunday, I think, with all of this, with some weather. It was Shane Hebert, Garrett Gregory, Stephen Whitaker Jr., Johnny Torres. Then our man Jared Maupin rounds out the top 5. Cale Westover, who was the fastest. He was started on the pole, fell back to 12th. But that's a damn good loaded field of limited modifieds right there.
Yeah, no, it really is. It's a really great car count and stuff to see. It's really good to see that track flourishing, especially with some of the questions coming into this at the end of the season as to whether or not that race was going to be, or that track was actually going to be still in operation. So
yeah, and they've solidified. It'll be Whitaker and that group at it once again. We've started to see some schedules come out, and if your track is about to release schedules and all that, I mean, get a hold of us. I mean, message Bobby or I mean, if you want to do it right here on the program, we would love to help you get some grip right there, and we can do it on one of the shows coming up because we're into the off season right now, so we've got stuff to cover, and we would love to help you get your schedule released. So I think that's something that's pretty important because we got pretty good little grip running right now.
Yeah, no, it'd be good to get all the series together up and running, and right now you never know. We're still wondering about the fate of CC Speedway and what's going to happen there. So if there's a racetrack in Corpus that you need to support right now, South Texas Speedway is the place to be.
One of the things, Bobby, quickly back to Snowball Weekend, talking about the Snowflake, I think one guy that deserves a big pat on the back is Justin Bonnet. So many people we saw it live in person there, just something where you're hoping and praying that he's going to jump out of that race car after just a fiery accident last year there in the Alan Turner Snowflake 100. He comes home with a top 10. He was super good all weekend, and man, talk about a comeback story. I mean, all the surgeries he had for everything that was wrong with him. Then he winds up with a staph infection. We've had him on this program. He talked about it. For him to battle back, I mean, 10th place, you have to think that for him and his team, that is like, man, that's winning the Daytona 500 for him.
Yeah, definitely was cool to see him. I got a lot of props for being able to come back and as far back as he came from his injury from that accident. So it was good to see he ran consistently in the top 10 all day. It's not like you fell into that top 10 finish. He ran well all day, was running deep inside the top 10, up 5th, 6th, 7th, right in there, and ended up in the top 10. So with the 10th place finish, it was a good run for him to be had. Probably a lot of good soup for the soul there for being able to come back. And he's raced in Pensacola before, but to come back to the Snowflake 100 where the accident happened again last year, definitely was probably really good for his mental status for both him and his family.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it, and just a great comeback. I mean, congratulations to him, and what a way to cap it right there. With a great run at the Snowflake 100. Also have to pass on before we sign out of here. I saw that Stanley Smith passed away today or yesterday, not sure when it was. That's a name that's very familiar to a lot of folks in short track racing circles. So again, 2020 claims another one, but we'll pray for him, pray for his family, and all those that touched a lot of folks in short track racing.
Yeah, no, it's an untimely thing. 2020 strikes again. Here's hoping things get better for the whole world here coming up in 2021.
Yes, sir. That is going to be the plan. Once again, congratulations, Owen Pittman, the Race on Texas Revved Up Sports Show Promoter of the Year 2020. Much deserved, I think.
Yeah, no, he's put on a hell of a show, and so it's good to see him be deserving of it, and hopefully he's got a nice place to put that trophy up at the house.
No, I'm sure he does. And congratulations to all the other promoters. There's a lot of good ones. I know they were struggling with that. Friends, reach out to Gina. That truck thing is a real thing. I can tell you. She's got dollars in place to make it happen, but you all need to help her because she needs folks that really want to do that. Bobby, have a great week, dude. It's going to feel just like December, right in the 70s again.
Yep, right in the 70s again. Low, cold at night and hot in hell in the daytime.
Absolutely. Stay tuned, friends. We are back next week. # Real Race Talk from Texas. It is a Revved Up Sports Show, friends. Be good. Be nice. And we'll see you next time.